Welcome to HR Voices, real talk with people leaders who are in it every day. We get into the messy stuff, the challenges that keep them up at night, and how they're actually fixing them. No corporate fluff, just smart conversations for people who care about people. HR Voices is brought to you by All Voices, the platform that cuts hours of manual HR work with step-by-step workflows and AI to assist with investigations, performance improvement, accommodations, leave requests, and more, so you can get back to the human side of HR. Welcome to HR Voices. I'm your host, Emily Fenech, and today we're joined by Dr. Milana Hogan. She is the Chief Talent Officer at Sullivan Cromwell. Welcome, Dr. Hogan.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Dr. Hogan, this podcast is only 15 minutes, and I am going to struggle to keep this conversation within 15 minutes because your research and the work that you've done, the more I learn about it, the more questions I have for you, and I'm so excited to get into it today. You have earned a doctorate in work-based learning, and you chose to focus your research on the gender gap in leadership, particularly within big law. And so what I learned from reading about the work that you've done is that for 3 decades, men and women have been entering law firms as first-year associates in roughly equal numbers. But when you look at the percentage of women that make it to senior counsel positions, that drops to 35%, about a third, and then for equity partners, only 15%. That drop-off is pretty huge. And I was hoping you could talk to us about what you've learned about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the good news is those numbers are a little bit better now than they were. So progress is definitely being made. When I first started my dissertation, the numbers you read were sort of where things were. And I was sort of starting from that place. And, anyone who looks at those statistics thinks we need to do something to address this. So I was really looking at sort of the issue from what can we control ourselves as women in the profession in order to make sure that we set ourselves up for longevity and tenure within the firms that we work for. And this is not limited to women who are in big law, which is where I am, but women who are lawyers in any area of the profession, whether you're a solo practitioner or a big law firm or a small law firm or wherever you happen to work in government for a client. Any of those places. So really trying to say, what can women do to set ourselves up for success? And importantly, I'm not trying to ignore all of the external factors that are in play here. So not trying to say that we should sort of ignore any of those or that anybody should not also focus on those. It's really an and rather than one or the other. But I was really focused on what can women themselves do to really set ourselves up for success. And so I started looking at what are some of the non-cognitive traits. And by non-cognitive, I mean, not measures of intelligence, but more behavioral traits that people can engage in that really help them reach the top levels of the profession. And when you look at the women who have reached those levels of profession, you talk to them about it, you try to understand what were the predictors of success for you, what are the traits that you're relying on in order to sustain that success over time. A couple keep coming to the top, and those are grit and growth mindset. And you find that women leaders in the profession tend to really lean into the growth mindset and to behave in a super gritty way almost all of the time. We all have moments where we do or don't do that, but there's a lot of sort of leaning into those two traits in particular. So those were the focus of my research.
That's fascinating. Could you help define grit and growth mindset for women who want to, make it to the top?
Yeah, absolutely. So grit is defined as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Grit is a word in the dictionary, so you can look that up. But this is really using the positive psychology definition that Angela Duckworth came up with. She's at the University of Pennsylvania and has done a lot of research in this space. That's where I got my doctorate. I heard about it initially from her. I was very lucky to have her as a teacher in one of the classes that I took. And she defined it really as that sort of really digging in, leaning in, not letting obstacles obstacles deter you in any way, and then playing the long game. So rather than, sort of a short burst of effort over time, which we've all done, if you stay up all night to study for a test, that's kind of a quick burst of effort. This is sustained over time. So really thinking about sort of your career as a marathon and pacing yourself and making sure that you don't really ever stop pushing and learning and trying to get better over time. And that people who do that, who don't sort of say, oh, I've arrived, I'm good, I'm fully cooked, people who really do that over time to tend to continue learning, and they continue to get better, and they continue to build their skills, and they continue to be really valuable within their organization. So that's grit. Growth mindset is really the belief, simply put, in the power of effort. So if you believe that the harder you work, the better you will get, that tends to motivate you to keep working hard, to keep engaging in that kind of gritty behavior, that sort of marathon of work and effort I was describing over time. And so if you really believe, if I put this effort in, I'm going to get better, and you don't believe that people's traits are inherently fixed, meaning, you can perform to a certain level and that's kind of all you got. You sort of believe, no, this is mutable. I can change it. I can raise my level of performance over time. And you really operate with that mindset. That also tends to be a really good predictor of success. And I think in these professions, especially big law, which is so challenging, and there's way easier professions for sure. We all know that. If you want to do a profession like this, you kind of have to have that inherent optimism and belief in yourself and willingness to bet on yourself sometimes, especially when the going gets really tough. I think that also is a really big differentiator. So when I was looking at it, I was saying, what are these women who are succeeding and who are making it to the top and who are running practice groups and who are really innovators and entrepreneurs even in this space? What do they have in common? And it's really that sort of gritty growth mindset orientation. You see that again and again when you talk to or interview, as I did, these
Mhm.
leaders of the profession.
That was my next question. How do you look for that? How do you spot that and then quantify it and put a circle around it and say that's the common trait here? How did you get to that conclusion?
Yeah, such a good question. And there's a couple different ways to spot it or identify it. The sort of easiest way is to give people the grit test and the growth mindset test. And there are two short tests, little quizzes. You can answer questions about how you approach situations, and that will spit out a grit score or a growth mindset orientation. So the easiest way to do it is that. And as part of my research, I asked everyone to take the grit and growth mindset test, and they were really generous with their time and took it. They're also very easy and quick to take. So anyone could Google grit test, growth mindset test, and they'll pop up and you could just take it. It's free, it's easy. So that's sort of the easiest way and the way I did it for my research. But you can also tell through conversations by asking people, how would you respond to a difficult situation? And you can tell based on how they, what stories they share and the behavior they're describing, sort of whether that's more growth mindset oriented or more fixed mindset oriented, or whether there's grit there or not. You can also look at a resume sometimes and you can see indicators. I like to do this if I'm hiring somebody new for my team. I like to look at the resume and say, hey, is there commitment to a certain subject matter or skill over time? Like, for example, if you were a Division I athlete, that would suggest to me that you were really committed to that over time. You don't just wake up and become a Division I athlete. You have to go to practice and you have to sacrifice and you have to go to bed when your friends are going to a party sometimes. And you have to wake up early and go to practice and you have to, work with a trainer and you have to do, all kinds of things. You have to fuel yourself properly and drink water, all the things. So, that's a good indicator, as would be, sort of expertise in any domain. Like if you were a chess champion or if you played an instrument and reached a high level there. So any sort of commitment. Also, if you're further along in your career, if you sort of really committed and, gotten several promotions and, stayed within the industry and written a book or developed some expertise, like those are all also indicators of grit and persistence over time.
Sure. So let's assume I take the grit test and I get a low score.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there's anything that can be done to sort of train yourself, rewire yourself, right? To have more grit? Can one attain grit, right? Or is it one of those you're born with it or you're not? What do you believe, or what have you learned in your research about this? Uh, this.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's the most exciting thing to me about this research, which is that they are entirely mutable, which is to say you can change them over time. And I think I would be far less interested in them if that weren't the case, because then it would just be sort of depressing. You take a test and you have it or you don't in the end. But there are definitely traits. I would say if you're somebody that feels like you've had a reasonable amount of professional success and you take these tests and you get low scores, like that's excellent news in some ways because you can now learn this new skill that you know is going to help you even more. So, I would not be upset if I got a low score. I think this is an opportunity for me to really lean into some behaviors that could help take me to the next level. And they are all learnable. I'll confess, when I first started this research many years ago, I was very fixed mindset oriented, which is to say I sort of believed I could perform up to a certain level. I was kind of born with a certain set of skills, and I probably couldn't exceed those. And then over time, I've really leaned in and adopted a much more growth mindset orientation. Now I do things I never thought I could do, that are both personal and professional. Professionally, I used to really fear public speaking. I remember the first time I did it, I was hiding in the handicapped bathroom before the talk thinking like how can I escape this building? I was literally trying to come up with an escape route so I wouldn't have to give this talk. And now I feel very comfortable doing it over time. So that's an example of a skill that didn't come naturally that I was able to work on and develop. And then, on a personal level, I really like to run. I've always liked to run. I was not a very fast runner to begin with, and I've been able to, get myself into a much faster pacing over time just through, effort and hard work and discipline and the like. And so it's possible in all domains. I've seen it. It's really exciting, I think, and feels like more of a win if you master a skill that didn't come easily versus one that was like you didn't have to try that hard. So I'm much prouder of the public speaking and the running than I would be, I think, if those were things that were easy for me when I started.
Yes, you're a marathon runner. Did I read that?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
awesome. Did that come as a result of this research as in an effort to build a growth mindset? Was that part of that or just a coincidence?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they were sort of simultaneous. I'm not sure one was the result of another, but I think they kind of happened along the same lines. I think, I am a goal-oriented person, so I would sort of run and, first for health, and then you kind of get the bug a little bit, and then you're like, oh, well, how far could I go? And could I go a little further? And let me try, one more mile. And then eventually you kind of get the bug, get addicted to it a little bit. And then I really wanted to see, okay, well, could I do a 10K, how about a half marathon? And then pretty much you're sort of signing up for your first marathon. I think it happens to a lot of people that way. But then I really got into it, and it feels incredible to do something that you shouldn't be able to do, really. 26.2 is, we're not really meant to go those distances, but we can, and we can go much farther actually. And so, I sort of got addicted to the challenge, and I like a goal. And so it all kind of happened together. But it was, I use running a lot in examples when I'm talking about the power of grit and growth mindset. So it's been a good example to use over time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
I ran a marathon. You're in New York City. I did New York City, but that was 15 years ago. So maybe I could get back into my own personal growth mindset and pick that
Yes,
up
you
again.
can do it. You can do it. I've also run New York City. It's the only one I've ever run. And I think it's hard to run another one after you've run New
Yeah.
York. It's just, there's nothing like New York with the crowds, like literally every step of the way. I think you do New York and then you're kind of ruined probably for all other marathons.
Yeah. And living there, it's just such a fun way to I mean, the whole city comes out. You can't beat that.
Yeah, right. The whole city is cheering for you. It's like the one and only time I say this to my kids. I'm like, you feel like a rock star because you have your name on your shirt. And it's the only time you'll
Yes.
be running through a crowd of people who are screaming your name. You're like, you'll never
Hmm.
get that again.
Yes. Yes. Well, to continue with that analogy, our audience is people leaders. HR folks tune into this and listen to this. So everyone has women in their workforce. And I know a lot of people probably see some of this leadership gap, right? And so they're listening to this. How can those people leaders, what advice do you have to sort of encourage grit and a growth mindset within cheer for their people, right? And encourage them to keep running that race? What practical advice do you have? You're a people leader. You lead the entire talent division at a huge law firm. What are you doing? How is this research being applied, and how can other folks learn from this and apply this within their workforce?
Yeah, it's a really important thing to do, and I definitely believe that you need to sort of interweave this into everything that you do. So we talk about the importance of grit and growth mindset, and really, under the broader umbrella of resilience and how important that is.
Hmm.
And we talk about that literally from the day that people arrive at the firm. It's part of our orientation programming. We have a conversation with leaders at the firm, and they talk very specifically about their own resilience, grit, and growth mindset stories. So people are hearing how important that is from people who are successful within the firm, and we're making that very clear. We also offer training sessions on grit and growth mindset strategies from the beginning and as we go along as part of our leadership development programming. So it's
Hmm.
really sort of embedded. And then, we also ask questions about it in our annual evaluation process so that people really understand the connection between performance and those traits. So we're really trying to weave that in a way that, that feels sort of weighty and important and actually impacts how you're perceived and how you're and I think that's important because if you sort of go out there and you don't connect it to evaluations or to leadership or to development or training, then it could just feel like words. But we wanted it to really be connected to people's development within the firm and to take it seriously. And we'll say, look, you need to be a really good technical practitioner. You need to understand the law. You need to have a lot of intellectual horsepower to do that. You need to have all of those things, yes, but also you need to have these non-cognitive traits, and grit and growth mindset are a couple, but there's other ones too, that you need to have to really differentiate yourself as a leader in this profession. I think all HR professionals right now are dealing with, everything that everyone in the world is dealing with. It's a chaotic time. It's frothy in a lot of ways. The market is frothy and the world is going through all kinds of challenges, and it can be stressful just to be a human and to live day to day, let alone if you have a really intense high stress job. So all of these traits I think are great, not only because they're predictive of success within a professional context, but also because they can help personally. I'm a mom of four, and I use these traits all the time, both to talk myself off the ledge in a scary parenting moment, but also to try to teach my kids, like, hey, sometimes you're gonna make varsity and sometimes you're not. And, you have to figure out how to get past that, how to use that, if it's a setback, how to use that as fuel. If it's, something that's disappointing, how are you going to not let that stop you from trying the next time? And all of those things. So I think they're also helpful because they're really important life skills in addition to professional skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, have you run any experiments to try and promote this? I know you mentioned some training programs and things like that, but has there been any sort of key lever that really can shift people into developing more of a growth mindset? Is there any, beyond just a basic training, like what types of experiments or tests have you run?
Yeah, I mean, so I have done, not within our organization, only to respect the purity of any experiment I would do. I wouldn't want to do it
Right.
within a group that I'm responsible for. So, we have done it industry wide, and my partner in that has been the American Bar Association Commission on Women in the Profession, and they have been really interested in this topic. And so I've partnered with them on two occasions. One was to do this study that led to the publication of the book Grit: The Secret to Advancement, which is my first book, and that was really looking at traits that predict success, and look at it at an individual level. And then more recently, in 2023, I partnered with them and we did sort of a broad study that looked at the extent to which these traits are helpful in the team context. And so that's probably the most recent experiment, if you will, that I've done. And that we really went out to teams and talked to people who were leaders of teams and then people who were members of teams, but not leaders, and tried to understand from both the leader and the member perspective, how do these traits come into play? And the sort of major takeaway from that study was that, if teams can operate in a gritty and growth mindset way, not just individuals operating that way who are on teams, but actually the whole team kind of comes together and shows resilience and grit, that the team tends to perform much better. And that would be, sort of from the perspective of the client or the person the team is working for within the organization. So that to me was really exciting because, again, the work sort of started from an individual perspective, but most of us work on teams most of the time. I mean, it's pretty rare that I'm doing something that doesn't involve another human at the
Yeah.
organization. We're almost always working with other people. And so in some ways that seemed like the impact there could be far greater because the team is such an important part of any individual's experience within an organization. A lot of times people will quit because they're on a bad team, or they'll stay even if they don't like the organization. They'll stay if they're on a great team. So
Hmm.
teams can really drive a lot of the sort of retention statistics that we all see and care so much about. So that's probably the most interesting thing I've done. And the takeaways really are, yes, this matters, and you should teach it at the team, not only the individual level.
Sure. If you're the only one on a team too that's demonstrating grit and growth mindset, that's a recipe for burnout as well. Probably isn't a
Totally.
lot of
You'll do
fun.
all the work. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Exactly. You'll do all the work and then you'll be mad at everybody else, and
Right.
not going to end well.
That's not going to end well. This has been really fascinating. We're going to link in the description of the program the two tests that you mentioned. I'm going to go take it right after
Oh,
this.
good.
I'm curious to see. I'll let you know what I get, and then
But
also
you're
your.
gritty and growth mindset oriented. That's my guess.
I sure hope so. And then we're also going to link your book in the comments as well. And any other resources, we'll make sure we link that for people. Do you have any closing thoughts, any sort of parting words of advice to give to the people leaders who might be listening?
Yes. I mean, I would, this is a hard job for people leaders. And I think, we are often, sort of the therapist, whether we're intending to be or not. We're sort of the recipients of, all of the things, and we really have our finger on the pulse and what is happening within the organization. And I think we sort of know all of the things, good and bad, that are happening, and we're the sort of keeper and the standard bearer. And all of that can be really challenging. So I would say, as we head into a new season, I know kids are going back to school, people are returning from, August vacations, we're sort of getting ready for the fall push, that, we should all take a moment to really pause and take care of ourselves in the best ways that we know how, whatever that looks like for you. We all have different ways that we can unwind and reset and sort of refuel, if you will. And I think we all need to do a good job at that, because it's hard to be a people leader, and it's hard not to be influenced or happy or sad based on what's going on. And if you want to continue to do it, especially over the long haul, really taking care of yourself is a super important part of that process. So I would encourage everyone to do that, to take care of yourself and put your own oxygen mask on first, as they say. I think that's been key for me, for sure.
Mhm. You took the words right out of my mouth. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Great
Yes.
advice. It was wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Have a good week.